Another week, another incredible race for your most important NASCAR betting stop of the day. This is the Money Stop, presented by Kickin the Tires and GridRival. He's Cole Cusumano. I'm Steven Cusumano. And man, as the playoffs have commenced in NASCAR, we are on an absolute heater. We've picked so many winners over the course of these first 6 playoff races. And now getting into the round of 8, Cole, Kyle Larson winning the most recent race at the Roval, where we predicted 7 of the top 10 drivers out of those that we mentioned. It was just a continuation of what we did exactly the same the prior week at Talladega. This has been a really impressive and fun run that we've been on with the analysis recently.
It really has been truly incredible. As you mentioned, once again, back-to-back weeks picking 7 of the top 10 drivers on our show, in addition to 4 of the top 5 finishers. So to say we're on a heater might be an understatement, and that is a perfect recipe for success going into the betting capital of the world in Las Vegas this weekend. But focusing a little bit here on the Roval, you mentioned it right there. Kyle Larson, once again, statement win, dominant victory at the Roval, his second of his career, and his second win in the playoffs, both coming in the elimination races. This team is primed for a deep run in the playoffs. We're already at the round of 8. He should be a lock for the championship 4, sitting over 50 points above the cutoff going into one of his best tracks in Las Vegas. But just looking here at the top 10 really quick, both of our winner picks, my winner pick in Christopher Bell finished runner-up. Your winner pick in William Byron finished 3rd. So podium finishes once again for our winner picks. From there, we had our value pick in Austin Cindric, one of our sleepers in Chase Elliott. We had A.J. Allmendinger, one of the favorites, finishing 6th. And then from there, we had both of our sleepers in the top 10 as well. My sleeper, Joey Logano, finished 8th. Your sleeper, Ryan Blaney, finished 10th. And just once again, speaking on the success rate of the Money Stop, we mentioned it at Talladega. We had an incredible success rate in terms of the prop bets, DFS, highlighting those 12 drivers in our show, you name it. But we sound like a broken record here, but we truly are. We had our most successful episode to date here at the Roval because we proposed 17 prop bets between the finisher props and top 5s, top 10s, top 3s, the over-under, better, worse positional prop finishes, the head-to-head matchups and DFS, and we nailed 11 of 17 prop bets proposed. That is just honestly insane to think about, and even considering the fact that while it wasn't as unpredictable as Talladega, we have seen in years past, now 7 starts at this Roval, this is a very unpredictable, a very wild track, especially when the playoffs are on the line going into an elimination race. So to nail 11 of 17 prop bets is just, it's kind of hard to even believe.
It sounds like something that would be almost unsustainable, but for us, we've sustained it. Hopefully you've been tagging along with us here on the Money Stop, presented by Kickin the Tires and GridRival. So as we close the book on the Roval, as you said, Cole, we're going to Vegas now, and there's 4 races left. There's a lot to be determined with the championship 4, because now we've got 8 drivers outside the cutoff right now. You've got Blaney, Hamlin, Elliott, Logano, and inside the cutoff, Kyle Larson, first of all, plus 33 points above the cutoff. And then you got Christopher Bell plus 13, Tyler Reddick plus 10, and William Byron plus 4. So this is going to be a really important race at Vegas, because from here you go to Homestead and then Martinsville, and you've got to have all your ducks in a row at these 3 tracks, because after that, it's on to Phoenix, and we're going to have our championship 4 decided. But that starts with here at Vegas. We'll take a look at the odds per BetMGM pre-qualifying, starting with the heavy favorite. To no surprise, it is Kyle Larson at plus 325. William Byron is plus 700. Tyler Reddick plus 800, tied with Christopher Bell. And then Denny Hamlin rounds out the top 5 at plus 850. So with that being said, Cole, as we start taking it to the bank and trying to add some money to your pocket, let's talk about our favorites to win this race at Vegas.
All right, this has to head off with none other than Kyle Larson, once again valued at plus 325. Want to preface our favorites, sleepers, and values section here by saying that GridRival does not have the daily fantasy values up for their weekly contest just yet, so we cannot provide those quite yet. So stay tuned to social media. We'll provide those at a later point in the week, but nonetheless, these will be our favorites, sleepers, and values that you can consider for your lineups going forward. And with Kyle Larson in mind, once again, coming off a statement victory, led a race-high 62 laps, and I mentioned it at the top of the show. He has now come out and won 2 races in the playoffs, both in elimination races. This is a team that is determined to win their second championship, make the championship 4 once again, and they are primed to do so in the best way because he's heating up at the perfect time. And want to highlight the remaining tracks going forward, starting with Las Vegas, obviously. But you mentioned it there, Homestead, Martinsville coming up, Phoenix as well. So the next 4 races, Kyle Larson has won at all 4 of those tracks. They are 4 tracks where he has been downright dominant his entire Cup career. So I think he is primed for potentially a second championship going forward. But looking at Las Vegas, this could be deemed his best track on the circuit because he has 3 wins there. That is tied for the most in the series. That includes back-to-back wins going into this weekend. And with that in mind, he has the best average finish in the series at 9.3. He has the most laps led at 628, with a 75% top 10 rate and top 5s in half of his 16 starts. With those career numbers in mind, you condense it down to the next-gen era, so 5 starts. He has 4 top 2 finishes on top of those 2 wins, with the most laps led in those 5 starts. And on the 1.5-mile tracks in 2024, he has 2 wins with over 320 laps led. And looking at a broader scope in the next-gen era at the mile-and-a-half tracks, he has 4 wins with 4 runner-ups and over 1,200 laps led. So that is all series best marks at the 1.5-mile tracks. We say it time and time again whenever we go to these tracks. Kyle Larson is the best of the best, along with a few other drivers, but it's very hard to top Kyle Larson when you go to these traditional 1.5-mile ovals. Moving on here, though, I want to focus on one driver who had a really impressive race. That is going to be Tyler Reddick, valued at plus 800 for the race win. And this is a driver who I think we saw had a championship-defining moment at the Roval. We saw him come back from a really nasty wreck at the beginning of Stage 2 where he knocked the right rear toe link out, actually made some pretty heavy contact with his team owner and Denny Hamlin in that wreck, trying to avoid one with Austin Dillon. But we thought this team was down and out. They finished the second stage dead last on track. The bent toe link is a very serious issue for a road course race like the Roval. And for them to come back and make this thing very narrowly was, again, a championship-defining performance, in my opinion. It was actually shades of Kyle Larson back in 2021 where he went on to win the championship. Kyle Larson in that race had an electrical issue very early on. They rebounded, made the next round, and sure enough, went on to win the championship. So I also want to reflect back to the regular season title race at Darlington, another race where he narrowly won that title by 1 point over none other than Kyle Larson, where he had a stomach flu in that race. Both races, MJ was in attendance, so this is a team that's very, very motivated. I think having a team owner like MJ on your side and in attendance, it just brings out the best in Tyler Reddick, the 45 team, and it just looks like they're primed for a really deep run as well. So just looking back at those 2 races, it screams that this is a team that should be a heavy contender for the championship. And just looking at Vegas, we talk about it all the time as well whenever we go to these 1.5-mile tracks. Tyler Reddick is one of the best drivers on these style tracks in the next gen. In 2024, he has 3 top 5s of these tracks with laps led in 4 or 5 starts. The only con is his worst showing on the 1.5-mile tracks came in his most recent start in the playoffs at Kansas, where he finished 25th. But keeping in mind, he has not had the best playoff showing thus far. Since his 6th-place finish in the opener at Atlanta, he has 5 finishes outside the top 10. But the pro is his 11th-place outing at the Roval was his best finish since. And having that inspiring performance, rebounding from that wreck early in the race, I think it's going to do good things for this team going into Las Vegas, because you look at what this team did, obviously, before the playoffs. He had 8 top 10s over 9 starts with 7 finishes of 6th or better. And then looking at Las Vegas, he finished a career-best 2nd in the spring. He has top 10s in 5 of his last 6 starts. And he's tied for the 3rd-best average in the next gen at 7.6. So to put it simply, I think you're looking at 2 drivers here in Kyle Larson and Tyler Reddick who are primed for a deep playoff run and who are legitimate threats for the championship, but especially for Las Vegas this weekend.
Yeah, and those are 2 drivers that are in the top 4 in the point standings right now. I'll take the other 2 drivers that are currently above the cutoff, and that's both William Byron and Christopher Bell, who have been the 2 hottest drivers in the playoffs recently at the mile-and-a-half tracks. I mean, they check all the boxes, and they were each yours and my pick to win. Last week, they finished 2nd and 3rd, respectively, each of the last 2 weeks. So I'll start with William Byron. He's riding not just the back-to-back top 3 finishes, he's riding 3 straight top 3 finishes, which included and started with Kansas when he finished 2nd at the mile-and-a-half track. 2nd best average finish in the playoffs of 11.3. He has been just simply performing at this juncture of the season. This is what they do at the 24 team. Mile and a half in 2024. He has 4 top 10s, including a 10th at Vegas. Out of the 4 top 10s, that includes 3 podium finishes, 2 mile-and-a-half track wins in the next-gen era, and 3 in his career. And at Vegas for William Byron, he has 1 career win, 4 top 10s, including that 10th in the spring. 200 laps led in this next-gen era are second in the field, and a 7.2 average finish in the next-gen era is also second in the field. So Byron is the ride. He is the wave we're going to keep on riding. And I think you could say the same for Christopher Bell. These are the 2 hottest drivers. These are the 2 that are not champions in the sport yet that I think have the best chance to become champions entering this round of 8. And I feel very strongly that William Byron at plus 700 is going to be a strong winner pick this week. And as I've been alluding to throughout the last couple minutes here, you can say a lot of the same things about Christopher Bell, who's plus 800 for the win. He finished second at the Roval, which marked his 7th top 10 over the last 8 starts, and that has included 7 finishes of 7th or better, with the lowest finish of 14th. So you're looking at an extremely high floor and a high ceiling, of course, evidenced by the best average finish in the playoffs. The only driver with a better playoff average finish than William Byron is Christopher Bell, 6.3. He's had 3 top 10s at mile-and-a-half tracks in 2024, including the win at Charlotte in the Coke 600. Our last mile-and-a-half finished 7th at Kansas with the most laps led, so obviously didn't get the result that he probably was deserving of in that last race. He did finish 33rd at Vegas in the spring, which was, I think you could very clearly say, a fluke, and in spite of that, he's had such great numbers at the intermediates. At Vegas, though, in the next gen, 3 top 10s, that includes 2 top 5s, and the fall of last year. This race a year ago, a career-best second-place finish. So he's valued at plus 800, just a little bit more of a long shot on BetMGM than William Byron. Those are 2 guys that at this point in the season I think of in the same vein. They are entering the prime of their careers. They know how to perform this time of year. And, we've said it. I think that those are 2 of the drivers to beat, and the other 2 you mentioned, Larson and Reddick. There's a reason those are the top 4 in the standings right now. I think those are the 4. This is their playoffs to lose. I mean, looking at the recent results, looking at their results at the next gen, in the next gen at the intermediate tracks, all signs point to one of those 4 cars being in victory lane. Vegas thinks that, the point standings think that, and we think that too.
Look, there's a reason that these 4 drivers are above the cutoff going into the round of 8. Realistically, they all 4 should advance into the championship 4, but you look at those 4 drivers beyond that. You've got Denny Hamlin, who's obviously been so close to winning that first championship in his Cup career. But then you got 3 champions. You got 3 former champions in Chase Elliott, Ryan Blaney, and Joey Logano below the cutoff. So I think this is a very interesting round for me because you have 4 guys at the top of the bracket. There's only 1 champion there, obviously, and Kyle Larson. But the 3 below the cutoff that are champions, I am very curious and I'm very excited to see how they do in this semifinal round because we know that pressure builds diamonds. And when you have 3 champions below the cutoff, like Chase Elliott, like Ryan Blaney, like Joey Logano, I want to see how they do in this semifinal round, and how they make their way into that championship race. So with that in mind, I think moving on to our sleepers here, there's not only sleepers for the win here at Las Vegas, but sleepers for the championship. And I want to emphasize this segment, as we always do, because this is where you can make the most bang for your buck, obviously. A lot of really good values in sleepers category. But we've also seen in the playoffs that having a spoiler winner is not out of the question. We've seen 3 spoiler winners that have not been playoff contenders go to victory lane already, and that includes our last 1.5-mile track this year at Kansas, and that was none other than Ross Chastain, one of the drivers that we highlighted. And what do you know? I'm actually going to highlight him once again for our last one. I'm going to highlight him next for our next 1.5-mile race this season at Las Vegas. So Ross Chastain is going to be one of my sleeper picks at plus 1,800 for the race win. Again, he won the last 1.5-mile race this season as one of our sleepers, and he is the only driver, along with Kyle Larson, with top 5s in 4 of 5 next-gen starts at Las Vegas. That includes a 4th-place finish in the spring, a career-best finish of 2nd in the fall of 2022, and he does have 1 outlier finish of 12th place, but then you look at and combine those numbers, those finishes, that amounts to a series-best 5.3 average in the next gen through 5 starts at Las Vegas. That's also taking into account he has the 3rd most laps led with over 150 at Las Vegas, including laps led in the spring. So I mean, you just look back to our last 1.5 mile track and how well he did in that race. And very similar stats I'll also add to that. I think Ross Chastain's going to be a really good sleeper for the win once again in Las Vegas. But one more driver I'm going to mention as my sleeper for the win is going to be a gut call. And it's going to feel weird saying this guy as a gut call given his name and his pedigree in the sport, but it's going to be Chase Elliott. Chase Elliott is plus 1,400 for the race win, coming off a 5th place finish at the Roval. That was his 4th top 10 in 6 playoff races. And you look at his scope of the playoffs, those 6 starts, he has a 12th place average, which is actually the 3rd best in the series, and still maintains a series best 11.7 average throughout 32 starts this season. So very much on par with his season average and how he's done this year. And why I'm picking Chase Elliott is because he has not steered us wrong in the playoffs yet. And I think you look at his Vegas stats, there's reason to not pick him as a spoiler for the win. But I'm going based off the eye test. I really like what I see from this team in the playoffs and this season. I mentioned it last week. They have been very quiet. They've been criticized for being quiet this season, but I think it's time for them to make some noise. I think they're going to break out here and go on a really good run here in this round of 8. Whether they advance into that championship 4 race remains to be seen, but that's all going to begin with Las Vegas. And the reason, again, why I'm calling him a gut call for this race is because he only has 1 top 10 in the next-gen era at Vegas in the first next-gen start back in 2022. However, he did score his best finish since then this spring, which was a 12th place finish. And prior to the next gen, though, he saw success at Vegas. He had a career best runner-up in the fall race of 2021, so the last race before the next gen, and all of his 170 laps led came in those 5 starts leading up to the next gen era. So he's struggled to find a grasp on this track in the next gen, but he has seen success in the past in his career at this track. And want to keep in mind, he has seen a lot of success on these traditional 1.5 mile tracks in 2024. He won the race at Texas earlier this year. He's finished top 10 in 4 or 5 starts with a lowest finish of 12th in those 5 races, and that amounts to a series best 6.4 average finish on 1.5 mile tracks. So that is a stat that's going very overlooked, much like Chase Elliott the entire season. I will not be overlooking him this weekend for Las Vegas, despite his struggles in the next gen, and for that, I think it's time for Chase to make some noise. He said post-race at the Roval he thrives under pressure, and it's time for that to, time for him to show out. So let's see Chase Elliott go for a top 5, maybe even the win this weekend at Las Vegas.
Yeah, I mean, that's honestly perfectly said. This is a guy that, from the early stages of his racing career, he's always performed well under pressure. And, I mean, you said it. I think just because of the name and who he is, people are expecting flashy results and, lighting up the stat sheets similar to the way Kyle Larson is, but very quietly. I mean, those are fantastic numbers at the 1.5-mile tracks this year. And listen, like you said, it's put up or shut up time for Chase Elliott at this point in the season. He's been consistent, but maybe not as many wins as you'd like. It's time to win some races. You're going to have to win one of the next 4 races if you want to be the champion in the Cup Series this year. And as we transition to my 2 sleepers, I'm going to go with a couple former champions as well, one of which is also not in the playoffs. I'll start with him. My sort of spoiler pick for the win, who's also a sleeper, is the Vegas, Nevada native, Kyle Busch, plus 2,000 for the race win. Mentioned the hometown heroics. He's been very vocal throughout his entire career that this is one of his favorite tracks to come to and one of his favorite tracks to win at, regardless of which series. He has 1 win in the Cup Series at Vegas. We were there. It was 2009. However, during the next-gen era, he has had 3 top 5s at this track, finished 3rd in each of the last 2 fall races with a 10th place average finish in the next-gen at Vegas. He's got over 60 laps led, including in the spring where he finished 26th, which was obviously not indicative of how well he ran over that race this past spring when he, that was that point of the season where nothing would go right for Kyle Busch. We've seen him break out a little bit. Obviously, that stretch entering the playoffs, early in the playoffs, that was the best run of the season for Kyle Busch and the 8 team. So we know it's in there. And if it's going to come out again, it's going to come out at Vegas. The only other thing, too, is, you talk about 8 drivers that are in the playoffs that have a lot to race for in the sense of winning a championship. There's incentive for everybody to go out there and win a race, but I think out of the non-playoff drivers, there's probably no driver with a larger incentive to win than Kyle Busch because he has won a race in 19 straight years. He wants to extend that streak to 20 straight years, and looking ahead to Homestead and obviously Phoenix for the championship and Martinsville, I think out of those 4 tracks, you would definitely say that Vegas is the best opportunity for Kyle Busch to extend that streak to 20 straight years. So he's done it at Vegas before. He's done it in the next gen at Vegas in terms of really good results. And I'm looking for my spoiler. I like your choice of Ross Chastain, but I really like Kyle Busch as a potential spoiler this week, where we've seen half of the playoff races result in spoilers. So keep that in mind. But I'm going to go with another driver that was oh so close to not being in this round of 8. We haven't mentioned it yet, but the fact that Joey Logano is plus 1,300 for the race win. Believe we mentioned him the last time we were at Vegas too, but thinking about the span of emotions for Joey Logano, he was gifted a round of 8 appearance when Alex Bowman was disqualified last week. We were talking a lot about how impressive a run it had been for Alex Bowman since the start of the playoffs, and everything just came crashing down when they couldn't meet that weight requirement. And so Joey Logano is the beneficiary of that. So he finishes 8th. That's good enough to advance into the round of 8. It's time to make it count. Same deal, though. You look at these next 3 tracks with Homestead and Martinsville. I think Vegas presents the best opportunity for Joey Logano to get out there and punch his ticket. And similar to what he did early in these playoffs. But it's a guy that's a 3-time race winner at Vegas, most recently in the fall of 2022. He's got the second most laps led in the field at Vegas at 538 and the 3rd best average finish of 9.9. That is a top 10 average finish in a whopping 22 Cup Series starts. So impressive numbers, high floor numbers for Joey Logano. During the next gen, he has that 1 win, which was 2 years ago, 1 additional top 10, which was the 9th place this past spring, 4 total top 15s, and he's led laps in 3 out of 5 races at Vegas in the next gen. 1 finish outside the top 15, and that was a race where he started from the pole. So every time we come to Vegas, Joey Logano's got speed. He's going to be motivated to make that, the ability to get into the round of 8 count. And here's the other thing. He is 8th out of 8 drivers. He's 11 points back of the cutoff. So obviously he's going to be doing some points racing, try to get some stage points, but they want to win this race as badly as anybody in the field. So, we're talking about guys that are championship favorites, some that are former champions. I really like Kyle Busch as a spoiler, also a sleeper. And I really like Joey Logano as somebody that, like you said, one of the really interesting, storylines of this playoff standing as it is now is the 3 former champions beneath the bubble. And how are they going to handle it? Said it before with Chase Elliott. He knows how to handle pressure so well. You can say the same about Joey Logano. They're in the same position, and those are 2 guys I'm definitely looking for to have a strong run at Vegas and potentially punch their ticket into the championship 4 round.
Before we move on to the value pick section for Daily Fantasy and GridRival, I wanted to highlight one more driver as kind of like an honorable mention and give a little bit of a preface as well. I fully expect HMS to be the team to beat in Las Vegas, but I think what we see time and time again every single year is that Team Penske is a factor at Las Vegas. It's a Penske track, in my opinion, for sure. We've seen it with Joey Logano. We've also seen it with Ryan Blaney, and while he has yet to break through for that win, he has come so close on so many years. And you look at his next-gen resume at this 1.5-mile track. Over his last 3 starts, he's finished 13th or better with a 6th-place finish in this race last year and a 3rd-place finish in the spring. So I think, and we didn't mention him, and I wanted to kind of add, have 1 spoiler winner and 1 obviously sleeper winner in the playoffs to give you some diversity, just seeing as we've had some spoiler winners in the postseason. But I think Ryan Blaney is also a really good pick for a sleeper in this win at Las Vegas come Sunday.
Let's jump into some value picks, as you mentioned. I mean, listen, Blaney, another round of 8 driver, another obviously defending champion, not just former champion. Really good pick there. But let's jump into value picks here. I'll kick this off. I've got a couple that, we're drawing to the end of the season. We're 32 races in, and there's been a couple young drivers, several young drivers that have really impressed this year. And 2 that immediately come to mind are Carson Hocevar and Noah Gragson. Also want to preface this segment by the fact that our daily fantasy sports partner, GridRival, does not have the numbers posted yet for the contest for daily fantasy. So these are drivers that we're kind of predicting will be values based on where Vegas has them. And usually, obviously, the values are not very far off. So starting off with Carson Hocevar, it's a guy that, we've mentioned, I should say, the Kansas results a few times when we're talking about our favorites and our sleepers. Thinking about Kansas, Carson Hocevar was one of the drivers we highlighted, and he had a top 10 car the entire race while he didn't finish there. But even entering this week, you look at away from the intermediate tracks, he's riding back-to-back top 15s, 10 top 20 finishes over the last 12 starts. So you're looking at a very high floor for Hocevar. He's had really good success at the mile and a half this year. He's had 7 top 15s with a career best third over those last 12 starts. So you've seen that there's definitely some form of a ceiling there. I think the ceiling is a borderline top 5 and maybe even a career best third. But a 15.8 place average finish in the playoffs is the 9th best overall, and that's, including 16 playoff drivers. So that's really impressive. It's not easy to do for somebody like Carson Hocevar, who is so young into his Cup career, and he's a guy that's made us look pretty smart on this podcast throughout the whole entire season, so why would we stop now? I think that Hocevar is going to be a good value pick this week, as well as Noah Gragson, as Stewart-Haas Racing nears a close on operations with just 4 more races to go. You know that we've talked about Josh Berry. We even last week talked about Ryan Preece, talked a lot about Chase Briscoe. Well, I got to talk about Noah Gragson too, because he's had himself a strong season. He has had 4 finishes of 18th or better out of the last 5 mile-and-a-half tracks. So, again, high floor. That's what you're looking at out of these value picks. Out of those mile-and-a-half tracks, he has placed top 10 twice. He finished 6th at Vegas, which is also, by the way, his home track, and he finished 11th in his first Vegas start in the Cup Series. So, perfect mix of a guy that likes coming here, wants a win here, wants to put up a good result here. And I feel like Noah Gragson, while the consistency hasn't been there this year, we know one thing for sure. The results have absolutely been there at the mile-and-a-half tracks. I mean, you're talking about 4 finishes of 18th or better out of the last 5 1.5 mile ovals. So for Noah Gragson, it's a guy that you're probably not thinking of because he hasn't had a lot of really impressive results during these playoffs, but he's done it at Vegas, he's done it at the mile-and-a-half tracks, and kind of the opposite for Hocevar. He's done it both. He's done it recently, he's done it at the mile-and-a-halves, and he's done it as recently as Kansas when he had a top 10 car. So not having any specific values to base this off of, I feel pretty good about those 2 value picks this week.
I do too. This is a great section. I think it's kind of like an all-star value picks category for drivers that have really performed time and time again the entire 2024 season. So with Hocevar and Gragson in mind, you got to mention Zane Smith, obviously. You mentioned it at the top of your analysis. Going into Kansas, we highlighted both Hocevar and Zane Smith, and that stable specifically, Aspire Motorsports, as a team that had really improved on their speed. They had been unbelievable on the 1.5 mile tracks, and for that reason, we got to pick Zane Smith once again. But even expanding beyond his 1.5 mile speed, he has had an immensely successful stretch in the results column. He has had 11 straight finishes of 23rd or better. So you talk about a high floor for Noah Gragson and Carson Hocevar. Very much the same exact sentiments for Zane Smith. He has 7 top 20s in that 11-race stretch with a career best 5th place finish. That also includes 3 top 10s, including his top 10 at Kansas, the last 1.5 mile track we were at, where he ran top 10 a majority of the day. And that also accumulates to a 15.3 average finish in the playoffs. And while that is the 7th best overall, and that's impressive in itself, that's actually the 2nd best average finish from a non-playoff driver in the 6 races we've had in the postseason, the other driver being Bubba Wallace. So Zane Smith has been quite simply a pleasant driver to bet on, pleasant driver to watch in these final stretch of the season. So he's got to be a driver that you're considering for your daily fantasy lineups. And it was a little bit tough here to pick another driver to end this value pick section, but sticking in the Spire Motorsports camp, a little bit of uncertainty for this driver, just being as it's his 3rd race with the team. Let's go with Justin Haley. Justin Haley has been, again, one of our best value picks this season, and I think you look at his Vegas stats, there's reason to believe that he can replicate that even with a new team, because in the next gen he has 2 top 15s, 3 top 20s. That includes a 14th place finish in the fall 2022 race with laps led, and a top 10 in the spring of 2023, an 8th place finish. And while he has yet to finish above 22nd over his last 2 starts, I still think that's a pretty decent floor. And I think for a driver who has proven that he can execute in whatever equipment he's been given, and given his speed on the 1.5 mile tracks, I think that he should be a pretty decent pick for this weekend for daily fantasy. But I think for this weekend, if you're looking for safer bets without looking at practice and qualifying, obviously, which we always preach to look at, especially when considering drivers for daily fantasy, I think your best bets are going to be the 3 Spire Motorsports Chevrolets and Carson Hocevar, Zane Smith, and Justin Haley, and the SHR Ford and hometown boy and Noah Gragson, who's had a really, really nice stretch to close out this 2024 season so far.
Well, let's zero in on 6 of these 12 drivers that we just mentioned between favorites, sleepers, values. And why don't you kick us off here, Cole?
Going to go with the Team Chevy sweep here. Got to pick Kyle Larson as the favorite for the win. Sleeper, going to go with my gut call in Chase Elliott, and then I'll go with Zane Smith as my value pick.
I'll take William Byron from the favorites category. I'll go Joey Logano as my favorite sleeper, and I'll go with Carson Hocevar as my value pick of the week. As we transition into big money bets now, Cole, let's talk about our favorite prop bets of the week. We call these big money bets because you can put bigger money on them and not have to feel as, much of a long shot on it. So talking about some top 5s, top 10s, before we get into this, I want to also remind anyone listening right now that if you're not on the GridRival wave, which is a daily fantasy sports app, you need to get on it. And there's so many reasons why, but here's a really good one. If you use the promo code Kickin, Kickin, so Kickin with no G, courtesy of our friends at Kickin the Tires, if you sign up for GridRival, you can get a $100 deposit match when you sign up. So this is something that, like we were talking about before, we made 17 predictions of the better or worse bets, the head-to-head parlays, various different things that this app offers. We had 17 of these, and we correctly predicted 11 of them, which is a remarkable success rate. So if you're not on this wave, I recommend you get on it soon. With that being said, before we dive into some of the GridRival props, let's take a look at our favorite big money bets, which are typically top 5s, top 10s on BetMGM and DraftKings.
Yeah, getting into big money bets here, I'm looking at 4 drivers I like a lot for this weekend. For top 5 finisher props, the top 10 values were a lot easier to come by the last 2 weeks at Talladega and the Roval, just given the unpredictability. But the values are more so in that top 5 range. I wouldn't really go with the top 3 either, unless you're looking at somebody like Kyle Larson, just given his resume at this track. But top 5 specifically, I like 4 drivers. First one's going to be William Byron at even at plus 100. From there, you've got Tyler Reddick for a top 5 at plus 110. Chase Elliott as a sneaky bet for a top 5 at plus 190. And then Ross Chastain top 5 has a really good value at plus 225. For somebody who's finished top 5 at Las Vegas in the next gen 4 out of 5 races, I think that's a really interesting one to consider. It might not be the most flashiest name or one that people are considering, but I think if you've listened to our show, there's definitely good reason to have confidence in betting Ross Chastain for a top 5 at plus 225. And now, obviously, that's four drivers you're considering for a top 5 finish. All 4 are not going to finish there, but those are the 4 that I've zeroed in on as the most likely to finish there, I would say.
And let's be honest, too, we picked 4 of the top 5 drivers each of the last 2 weeks. So we are on as much of a heater as we've ever been on with the Money Stop. I like those a lot. I like what you said, too, the fact that there's not a ton of value to be seen with top 10 bets right now. But what I would say is that keep an eye on practice qualifying, because some of those guys that we mentioned as great value picks, the Zane Smiths of the world, who's plus 500 for a top 10, Carson Hocevar, who's plus 425, or even Noah Gragson, who's plus 350, each for top 10s. Those could be very solid big money bets based on how they unload, how they look in practice and qualifying, where they start, and all the other variables that we like to discuss. So I like what you said, though, because those are 4 drivers that, again, we've already touched on with favorites, sleepers. I think that's very solid input for big money bets this week. As we, though, jump over to our friends at GridRival and look at some predictions for better or worse picks, these are ones that we've, again, been very successful with the last couple of weeks. We'll also talk about head-to-head parlays, but these are basically just, for example, I know the first one you're going to mention, Cole, if you haven't, downloaded GridRival yet, you're predicting whether or not Ross Chastain will finish better or worse than 10.5. Kick that one off. What do you think there?
Better or worse positional picks provided by GridRival. This is where GridRival provides you a finishing number here for the corresponding driver, and you have to predict whether they will finish above or below what is given. And for my 4 drivers, I'm going to zero in on 3 drivers who I was very high on this episode, and 3 that I mentioned for big money bets. There are also 3 Chevrolets, and 2 of them are Hendrick Motorsports drivers. But I want to just preface by saying, when you look at these numbers, the way I go about, picking my battles and going with the the better or worse prediction is looking at what that number provided is. And if it's a good number, like, for instance, Kyle Larson this weekend is better or worse than 3.5, it's going to be tough to predict a top 3 finish, or I guess to hit a top 3 finish for Kyle Larson. And maybe that's a bad example because he has finished top 2 in 4 of his 5 starts here in the next gen. But, I mean, it's still a very tough number to hit, and there's more certainty with someone like Ross Chastain, who we're very high on. His positional value is 10.5. So I like Ross Chastain to finish over 10.5. So a top 10 for Ross Chastain, considering he's finished top 5 in 4 or 5 starts with a lowest finish of 12th in the next gen at Las Vegas. So with that in mind, the next 3 drivers I'm a big fan of. I mentioned the 2 Hendrick Chevys. Chase Elliott, better than 8.5, so a top 8 finish for Chase Elliott. And the one I'm also a really big fan of here is William Byron, better than 6.5, so a top 6 finish for William Byron, who I am very confident in is going to get a top 5 this weekend, seeing as he's finished in the top 3 with podium finishes over his last 3 starts. So I love those 3, in addition to a really good value for Christopher Bell, who is his positional value is better or worse than 7.5. We're going to go with better than 7.5, considering the fact that he has finished 7th or better over his last 7 of 8 starts. So that's a really good value right there. I think he's going to be due for a top 5 day, if not a borderline top 5 day, and I think given a 7th place buffer, that is a really good one that you can have confidence into, pick and predict. So give me Chase Elliott over 8.5, Christopher Bell over 7.5, William Byron over 6.5, and Ross Chastain over 10.5 as my locks for this weekend.
I like those a lot. And I also want to give another reminder, the fact that you can parlay these together with other types of bets, one of which is head-to-head parlays, where we talk a lot about head-to-head match bets on BetMGM, DraftKings, but there's not as much flexibility on those different types of, those are sports books, but for our daily fantasy sports partners at GridRival, you can parlay those better or worse picks with some head-to-head driver matchups. And there's a few that are pretty enticing this week because several drivers we have talked about, several drivers we have not talked about going up against one another.
Yeah, so last week I kind of went through the same drivers I was confident in for the big money bets and the better or worse positional props and went with that for the head-to-head parlay. So I want to give a little bit of variety for these head-to-head matchups, and I went with some drivers that I did not mention. The first one I did, though, and that was Ross Chastain. In case you couldn't tell, we're very confident in him this weekend. So Ross Chastain, better than 2 positions, so 1.5, two positions over Brad Keselowski. Brad Keselowski, he has 1 finish better than 19th in the playoffs, and that was at Talladega, super speedway race. Outside of that, he's been a top 15 car at Las Vegas in the next gen. And again, just given Ross Chastain's stats of those 4 top 5 finishes, the outlier finish of 12th, I think that's a really, really good one for this weekend. Another one I like is Alex Bowman, better than 3.5 positions, so 4 spots better than Chase Briscoe. Alex Bowman has 2 podium finishes, including a win in the next gen with laps led in 2 starts at Las Vegas. And despite his disqualification and playoff elimination, he's still been one of the best teams in the postseason. Chase Briscoe, however, only has 1 quality finish at Las Vegas in the next gen. That was a 4th place finish in the fall race 2022. He finished 21st this year, which was on par with his 22.3 average in the next gen at Las Vegas. He's also had 3 straight finishes of 24th or worse in the 2024 season. So in that round of 12, 3 straight 24th or worse finishes. For the final matchup that we have, I actually do have one more driver that we did mention, and that was going to be Noah Gragson. And the reason I picked this matchup, and it's going to sound very weird here, Noah Gragson over Martin Truex Jr., is because the spread over Truex is 8.5 positions. So if Noah Gragson finishes within 9 spots of Martin Truex Jr., that hits. And I think that's a really good one to consider because all the reasons we mentioned with Noah Gragson is high floor. He finished top 10 here in the spring. He has another 11th place finish in his first next-gen start at Las Vegas. And then you look at Truex, though. There is a case to be made for him, though, because he has finished top 5 in all 5 Vegas next-gen starts, the only driver to do so in that regard. But in the same vein as Chase Elliott, I'm looking at the eye test. He only has 1 top 10 over his last 11 starts in 2024 with a 23.8 average. However, his best finish in that span was a 3rd place finish at Kansas, our last 1.5-mile track. So you could make the case that this is a tough one to hit, but I think given the buffer of 9 positions between Gragson, Martin Truex Jr., and this is a home track for him where he finished top 10 before. I do like Noah Gragson by 9 spots or within 9 spots of MTJ for Las Vegas.
Yeah, I mean, if he finishes 10th, all Noah Gragson has to do to hit that is finish 18th, and that's assuming Truex finishes 10th. So I would say that's my favorite out of those head-to-head parlays. From here, we'll usually give you a daily fantasy lineup recommendation from our friends at GridRival, but as of the time recording this, we don't have odds currently, so we'll give that to you on social media instead at _MoneyStop. Let's put our money where our mouth is. Cole, rapid fire. We've been on an absolute heater with picking our race winner and sleeper picks. In fact, you've had a driver in the top 3 for your winner pick 3 of the last 4 weeks. You and I picked the second and third place finishers last week in Christopher Bell and William Byron. You've got first pick this week. Who are you taking?
No-brainer, Kyle Larson. He is going back-to-back. Actually going to win 3 in a row at Las Vegas. His best track on the circuit. Give me Kyle Larson all day. Lock him in for race winner. Lock him in for top 3 prop bets. You name it, Kyle Larson is going to victory lane for a 3rd straight time in Sin City this weekend.
I love that pick. That would have obviously been my pick. I'm going to go with the same winner pick back-to-back weeks for the first time in a while, and that's William Byron. I just feel so good about the Hendrick Chevys. I feel so good about William Byron, and so I will pick William Byron as my race winner for the 2nd consecutive week, because why not? For our sleepers, I'm going to go with, it has to be any driver, our criteria outside the top 15 in odds. I'm going to go with Noah Gragson as my sleeper, because why not? You got to go with a gut call on these every once in a while, and he finished 6th here in the spring. He's had a strong results at this track over the course of his racing career. I'll take Noah Gragson as my sleeper.
Yeah, so I'm going to go with a driver that we didn't mention on the show. It's going to be a gut call, but he's also been a driver that's proven to be really good on 1.5-mile tracks in the next gen. It's going to be Bubba Wallace. I mentioned him very briefly during the value pick section. He's the driver with the best average finish outside of the playoff contenders in the playoffs thus far through 6 races, so give me Bubba Wallace for a sleeper this weekend.
Love it, Cole. Vegas, one of our favorite tracks, one of our kind of secondary home tracks. It's really fun as we begin the round of 8. We'll drop the jack on the most important NASCAR betting stop of the day. For Cole, I'm Steven for Kickin the Tires and GridRival. This has been the Money Stop. We will see you next week as we go to Homestead.